into right field. She is gone. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly. Oh, hang on to the roof. Goodbye, home run. Mattingly. Tucker makes one. Deep left field. Down the line. That ball is out of here. Out of here.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another mini reaction episode of Tablesetters. As always, I'm Steve, joined with my tag partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
What's going on, everybody? Happy to be here. Steve, I'm going to start with this. We're here to talk baseball, but you're a Packers fan. You got Packers, Bears. And I was shocked to just read a little bit ago. This is only the third time they're meeting in the playoffs.
Yep.
Bears haven't beaten the Packers in the playoffs since, what, 1941 or something like that?
Yeah,
How are you
2010 was the
feeling?
last time they met, NFC Championship. I'm feeling pretty good. It's the matchup I wanted out of all the ones we had. I think they match up better against the Bears than the Eagles. Division matchups. Jordan Love playing for the first time in about a month. Hopefully Josh Jacobs is healthy. A lot of injuries all over the place, but no excuses out here, of course. Micah Parsons going down completely derailed their season, and then all the injuries. Tucker Kraft all the way back on tight end day earlier in the season. But all that said, you erase it clean. I'm feeling good. They dominated the Bears all the way through the end of the game. They never held a lead. So all the Bears fans that want to act like they dominated the Packers, and this is Ben Johnson's chance right now. I'm not going to get too far into it to finally kind of live up to what he said in the beginning of the season. He wants to beat Matt LaFleur twice in a season, and we'll see if Ben gets his way.
Well, all right. So we'll stop the football conversation with this just to wrap it up and get into the real baseball stuff. But baseball comparison, you're a Yankee fan on the baseball side. If the Bears were to eliminate your Packers this weekend, what would that be equivalent to Yankees-wise?
It feels like the direct comparison has to be the Red Sox, but my most hated team in the division is the Vikings, bar none. Like, I know they've been bad this year, but the Vikings to me are the most irritable team. The Detroit Lions, like, they've been bad for so long. Even when they were good, it's hard not to root for Dan Campbell. He's getting on my nerves a little bit now because they've been good for a couple of years. I know they didn't make the playoffs this year. But I would say it's probably the Toronto Blue Jays I would correct it to. So almost equivalent to what we saw with the Yankees this year, eliminating them.
Gotcha. Okay, that's fair. All right, so we have a couple main topics we're going to talk about, but let's squeeze this in real quickly at the top. Today's arbitration day. We've got all these reports about arbitration, who's agreeing, who's not, who's going to have an arbitration hearing. One of the weirdest things in the sport, right? Like baseball, very unique to baseball, where sometimes a player and a team that he belongs to have to basically go to a hearing and argue against each other of how good they are. And like, you have to kind of take down your own player. Very strange. But the report, Tarek Skubal, apparently $13 million off. He wanted $32 million in arbitration. The Tigers offered 19. The most for a pitcher ever was actually the Tigers and David Price for about 19 and a half. The most ever for anyone, Juan Soto, 31 million. So Skubal wants more than that. I mean, thoughts? Is this basically the death knell? Like, this is it? Like, that's basically the sign where they're going to be gone soon?
I don't think that's the case quite yet, but I do believe there will be a negotiation to be had. And I think the Tigers are playing hardball. And it always is tough to see this happen with a player and an organization. We hear the tense conversations, but it is pretty laughable. And I want to use it again. We talked about Marcus Stroman making $18.5 million, and you offer the best pitcher in the world right now $19 million to play ball. We'll see where it settles at this point, because as you mentioned before, they're very far apart. You have any guesses about where it goes? Are we looking at $25 million? Is that something Skubal looks at as saying, like, I'm okay with that, knowing he will get an opportunity to sign for a really big deal next year?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the kind of thing where he's like, asking for the stars and maybe you land on the moon or whatever that saying is. And like, he's actually okay with 25 million. He just wanted to aim high to kind of get there. I don't know. Or if he's going to be offended by that and it's going to, increase the chances that he's gone. But I just feel like it doesn't bode well for their negotiations in the future. Even if they do get to a point here where he's still a Tiger for this season. It's like going forward, all we've heard is how far apart they are. So it's strange because the reports are saying Detroit's not acting like a team that's trying to sell their best pitcher. And we saw the report today that the Yankees inquired about Skubal, and they came away feeling like they'd have to give half their team away. So an awkward situation in Detroit right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I saw the funny tweet I shared in our baseball chat. The Yankees leading the league in discuss plus because they're in conversations with everybody. Nothing seems to be moving. They
I
got the
don't know.
deal done with
The
Jazz
Red Sox
Chisholm.
are on their tail,
They got
man.
that done today. Jazz Chisholm, $10.2 million they settled without
In
going
our
to arbitration. So pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of players I feel like actually agreed without going to arbitration. I mean, Edward Cabrera, who we're going to transition into here in just a second, ends up agreeing for 4.45 million with his new team, the Cubs. I believe the estimate that I saw was going to be around 3.75. So he makes a little bit more than what he was projected for. And that's kind of a situation. You just brought the player in. You kind of, you don't have to necessarily give him exactly what he wants, but it'd be really weird to acquire a guy and then go to a hearing and argue that he's not that good.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear those conversations, and it always puts the organization in an awkward spot or the player in a weird spot to sit at a table and have to defend themselves while they're valuable. But that is the business side of baseball we always see. But you mentioned the man's name, Edward Cabrera. We saw this go down yesterday. The Cubs acquired right-hander Edward Cabrera from the Marlins, sending a deal that was centerpiece by Owen Caissie. We also got Cristian Hernandez and Edgardo de Leon. They go over to Miami. On paper, it is pretty a straightforward exchange here of pitching for a position player depth. But in reality, I mean, I think it's far more deliberate declaration of where the Cubs believe they are in the competitive cycle and how they intend to continue to operate next season. And I think, look at Edward Cabrera. We mentioned the Yankees last week. We talked extensively about what he would bring to the rotation for New York. But I think looking at even the Cubs, you can kind of read the tea leaves about where they were more than a year ago, dating back to last summer. They were looking at upgrading this pitching staff. We understood that it was something that needed to be addressed this offseason. It became impossible to ignore for a rotation that desperately needed support. And we saw that fragility surface in October. It was a big issue for them. Injuries were thinning them out. They looked weak, very weak in a spot where honestly they looked deep weeks earlier in the playoffs and kind of fell apart for them. So entering the offseason, this objective was pretty clear. And of course, like a big conversation about this, like, yes, we're going to be talking about Owen Caissie and Edward Cabrera and what they got back and the return. But the market dictated a lot of urgency because you watch Dylan Cease. He signed a 7-year deal with Toronto. Michael King winds up going to San Diego, staying there on a 3-year deal. Tatsuya Mai, we covered it right here on the show, chose Houston. And I think, we're watching the elite free agent starters rapidly disappear, and the Cubs face this narrow set of choices. I think they have to look at, all right, are we going to overextend financially? Or are we going to pivot towards the rare form of upside and still existed on the market here? So they pivoted towards Edward Cabrera. You mentioned the money, really affordable. We'll talk about his numbers in a second, but was this expected on your part? Is Edward Cabrera enough of an upgrade to put Chicago back in the conversation to be a threat in the National League?
Yeah, I mean, I like the rotation. I like the depth they have now, too. Hopefully they get Justin Steele back at some point in the season. And if that's the case and he comes back and looks like the guy that we remember, you have him up there. You have Cade Horton, who we mentioned last episode, led the entire major league or the entire league in ERA in the second half of the season, was a stud. And obviously you hope Shota kind of gets back on his game. We know we've seen it before, so I think there's belief that he can fix himself there. And Matthew Boyd was wonderful last year, and you could keep on going. There's some more to that depth as well. Listen, Edward Cabrera, I think, again, this is a good landing spot for him in Chicago because he doesn't have to go there and be a savior. He doesn't have to go there and be an ace. He's got lots of potential, and last year was the most we saw that potential start to come to fruition. So if it was a different team where Cabrera was being relied on to come be the number one and maybe even a number two, I know he's been mentioned as the number two in Chicago. I don't feel that way. I mean, I didn't even mention Jameson Taillon as a veteran there. Like, they have pieces there now. It's very it's likable. It's a likable rotation for sure. But if this was a deal where it's a team's number one prospect and you're bringing Cabrera to be the guy, I would hate this deal. But it kind of fits. The Cubs offense was pretty good last year. Now, the strange thing is it doesn't seem like they have any interest in bringing Kyle Tucker back, which is interesting. The thought was Owen Caissie would have a very good shot at taking over for him. So you do lose some offense here, and I think they're still looking to add. It'll be interesting because clearly they did not want to go spend money on a free agent pitcher. But at this point, if you're letting Tucker go and you didn't use money for a pitcher, instead you used player capital, you have money to go spend. So there's been some rumors about Alex Bregman. There's been some rumors about Bo Bichette, and we've heard some other names out there connected to the Cubs. I feel like they have to go make another move, most likely in free agency. I would think the Nico Horner trade idea is taken off the table now. I don't see why they would possibly trade a guy like that when they already got the pitching that they were looking for. So, I mean, we could get into Cabrera and his potential and his strengths and his weaknesses, and I'm sure we will mention some of those here. But overall, the deal, I know it's not straight one for one, but we're going to talk about those two names mostly here. I think it made sense for both sides. I think if you ask me which team I liked it better for, it's very equal in my opinion, but I'd skew a little bit to the Marlins. Bringing a guy like Owen Caissie in there for Edward Cabrera when you have plenty of other pitching available to you, you really don't need Cabrera, and you're trading him at the peak of what he's done. It's great by Peter Bendix. He has pulled this off a few times now where he trades a guy away. He's selling high, as you're taught to do, at their highest. He did it with Luis Arias too. People thought he was crazy when he did that, when he traded Arias to San Diego at basically the beginning of a season a couple years ago. Did the same thing with Tanner Scott, traded him away at the height of his powers. This has worked really, really well. So I like it for both teams, and I think I love it for the Marlins.
Yeah, and you mentioned the most complete season of his career. We saw 2025. We discussed the numbers last week, 3.53 ERA across 26 starts. We discussed all that, but digging deeper into his full season, you look at a sustained peak, and this is what I like to do looking at the back of the baseball card of looking at the numbers of when he was at his best. Between May 4th and August 8th, he recorded a 2.22 ERA. He ranked third in the National League during that span. He trailed only Paul Skeens, who had a 1.60, and Chris Sanchez at 2.06. So this wasn't just a surge or a favorable matchup run. He kind of found it and clicked for a decent amount of time. It was a 3-month stretch that showed teams, and maybe the Cubs obviously scouted that time period where he looked like that number 2 or potentially frontline ace if he was able to put it all together. But, we can talk about the arsenal and kind of go into his baseball savant page. His most used pitch in 2025 was a changeup here, 25.8% usage. He averaged 94.2 miles per hour. And it makes it the hardest thrown primary changeup by a starting pitcher in all Major League Baseball. So that is generally uncommon to look at as far as the pitch shape. Opponents hit just 203 against that pitch with a slugging percentage of 266 and only 1 home run allowed all season against that pitch. So it is a pitch that kind of breaks down the conventional classification of what we think a changeup is, because we mentioned the velocity on it. But also you look at the 2 bat missing breaking balls. I mean, the curveball was 23.6% usage, 84 miles an hour, which I think the difference between those pitches certainly leads you to believe that there is some confusion when he's able to get it going. And the slider, 17.3% usage. They got whiff rates in the 40% range last year. So you mentioned it all going there. And the biggest piece we discussed last week, Devin, was the improvement on the walk rate and the control. He had an 8.3% walk rate in 2025, substantial reduction in career average of 11.7%, which there's a lot of things that we're seeing on. Did I lose you? Are you still there?
I'm still there. You're breaking up a little bit, but I got you now. I think we're okay. So I heard what you said, even though I had some interference there. Yeah, I mean, to go to the changeup, which you mentioned first there, obviously, I think that's his money pitch, even though the curveball ranked a little higher for him last year specifically. But it's not a traditional changeup, as you said, insanely hardly thrown for a changeup. That's the name of the pitch, but to be honest, sometimes it acts more like a sinker where it kind of is going down, fooling you. Traditional changeup, we're thinking of something that comes out of the hand looking like a fastball, and it's significantly slower. I mean, this is only a couple miles per hour slower than his average fastball most of the time. So it's a much different type of changeup, but definitely a money pitch for him. The fastball, even though the velocity ranks high, it has just not been a good pitch for him. And last year, the interesting part is the pitch was not better. He just threw it a lot less. He would frustrate the hell out of people for years where he would just keep on throwing his fastball and he could not locate it for anything. And he would keep on throwing it. And finally, someone got in his ear and said, just throw it less. Throw the sinker more. That can kind of act as your fastball that you need to get over. Sinker has not produced particularly well either, but a little less dangerous, I think, than his fastball that he has not figured out. So the usage was very interesting last year. The arm angle dropped about 4 degrees down to 36 degrees. So he made some changes. It'll be interesting to see what the Cubs do with him now, with their pitching coaches getting their hands on him. But yeah, he's got so much potential. My concern, honestly, more than how he's using his pitches and how the pitches are performing, is health, I think. And you mentioned command, but he made strides in that area last year, which was good to see. The health, I mean, last year was his career high in innings pitched, and it was 137 and 2/3. Like, he's never gotten to 140 innings, and he's been pitching for a while here. Shoulder injuries, elbow injuries last year, I believe, had a UCL sprain towards the end of the season. Like, that's concerning stuff. And if you were paying attention to Twitter yesterday, the news came out in the middle of the day that it appeared the Cubs and the Marlins were finalizing a deal involving Edward Cabrera. And then the hours went by, hours, way longer than usual when you get a note like that, before we came to a conclusion. And then maybe 3-4 hours later, it was confirmed. Some people believe that was people going over the medicals and maybe taking their time. The Cubs have a reputation of being very careful with medicals, okay, and not really turning the other cheek on anything. Just last year, before the Phillies acquired Jesus Luzardo, the Cubs had a deal with the Marlins for Jesus Luzardo, and they would not clear the medicals, and it fell apart. And then the Phillies got him, and he was outstanding. So I don't know if there was some part of the Cubs front office that was like, you're not doing it again. Push this one through. But if that's the case, it's a pretty dangerous mentality. But I mean, I guess it is kind of hard to see Jesus Luzardo in your hands and then go to another team and dominate for them. Imagine the Cubs with that version of Jesus Luzardo last year. Who knows how far they would have gone. So that part is interesting. There's some people speculating that they're not sure every team would have cleared this guy's medicals in this trade. And they just traded their number one prospect away and a couple other pretty good looking players as well. So we'll know the results eventually. Maybe not this year. I mean, both these guys are going to play on their new clubs for sure. But I mean, maybe we don't judge this deal completely until a few years down the road.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. We'll talk about Owen Caissie because I definitely want to dive into his numbers in AAA. What we see, he is the Cubs' number one prospect. But you mentioned the fastball of Edward Cabrera. Digging into some more of the numbers, the sinker was an issue too. He allowed a 370 opponent batting average, a 583 slugging percentage. And you look at the four-seamer surrendered a 583 slugging percentage. So there's a lot of volatility here. But again, for the Cubs, looking at the health, that's the recurring theme. You can make the argument that the fastball wasn't taking shape and helping out, and the sinker, because injuries loom large here. You mentioned the right elbow strain in August, but the posterior right elbow discomfort in July and kind of shut his season down after it. So this is not a risk-free asset that they're looking at. No. And I don't think it's value that you can refine right now. You mentioned sort of leaving an open-ended book. We have to see what Edward Cabrera could be. A lot of people were saying, is that the peak we saw last year? Or maybe the Cubs are hoping for, we're going to see way more. Because if you get him to 145 innings, 150, we could be like looking at a pitcher that's one of the best in baseball. But let's talk about Owen Caissie, 23 years old. We mentioned the Cubs' number one prospect, number 47 overall in MLB pipeline. Look at the slash line last year in AAA, 286, 386, 551, 22 bombs, 99 games he played. He had an abbreviated MLB debut that we saw for a little bit here. But his path for everyday playing time in Chicago certainly was muddied because pretty narrow, where you look at Hernandez and De Leon, they're the longer-term bets, but they both address a Marlins system that's desperate for a lot of the position player upside. They're looking to really build the depth, and Peter Bendix has made that his mission. But from Chicago's perspective, the timing is as important as the talent that they're getting back here. The money for Cabrera has to be discussed here. He earned $1.95 million in 2025. We mentioned the arbitration conversation. It's still a very affordable starting pitcher under club control through 2028. Those are things that cost certainty certainly matters here. You're giving up the player in Owen Caissie, but at the same time, you're helping without having to go out there and take the cost risk of a Ranger Suarez or a Framber Valdez, where if Eddie Cabrera is the guy and outperforms that contract, which you can imagine he will, you're looking at a team that could not only win the NL Central, but they could potentially win the National League in all, because this is a team that we saw last year. They played amazingly well. The Brewers certainly got hot and surpassed them, but there were points in the season where the Cubs looked like they were going to be a threat to potentially contend for a World Series or, give any of those teams a National League run for their money. But injuries in that starting rotation, it was an issue. And it is interesting that you're taking a guy with injury as a recurring history to be your saving grace in that way. But maybe the Cubs are able to look at him and say, we believe that the gains he made in 2025 are real and he will be even better in 2026. But again, nothing's a sure thing. But then again, you can say, Devin, what is a certainty here? Pitchers always get hurt. You kind of have to like what you saw from him. And I think for the Cubs, they're weighing it out. For them, they're hoping they're going to get more of what we saw in 2025 for the most part.
Yeah, the thing I'm looking at this point is how the offense is going to come together because you got to like the depth of the pitching staff and the talent they have. We'll see who stays healthy and who performs and who doesn't. Every pitching staff has that, but the more depth you have, the more talent you're putting yourself in a better position. But this does have a trickle down effect now. I mean, I'm watching PCA. I think he's going to be the biggest X factor for the Cubs because he looked like two different players last year. Looked like a superstar right in the first half, and then pretty human in the second half. And now with Owen Caissie's departure, with Kyle Tucker's departure, is Seiya Suzuki really going to be relied on to be your right fielder? I thought you just said last year you don't want him playing the outfield very much at all. He was just going to be a DH. Is Kevin Alcantara going to have an opportunity to win that job, and so you can keep Suzuki in the DH spot? I don't know. But on the Caissie side for the Marlins, I just love this. This dude, you mentioned a few things about him. 6'3", 190 pounds. You're going to get to watch him most likely in the WBC in about a month or two here with Canada. So that'll be fun to watch. If you're if you're a Marlins fan, you should have your eyes glued to those games. So a lot of potential here. He can hit home runs to all fields. He hit the one with the Cubs in his cup of coffee, opposite field shot, impressive, good looking swing. He's getting Kyle Tucker comparisons actually, which might be a little hyperbole, but I get it. He's an exciting guy to watch. 30 home run potential because he's going to grow more into that frame. He's going to get even stronger. The concern is the K percentage, which is pretty normal for some of these higher young prospect guys, right? Usually if there's one struggle, very often it's that. 27.9% at AAA. And then in that very short stint in the majors, 40.7. I mean, it's a small sample size, but still not a number you'd like to see there. The weird thing, though, is the K percentage has not necessarily brought him down to like a 230, 240 hitter. He still hits around 270, 280. So he seems to be able to make up for it. He does walk at a nice clip as well. Defensively, not going to wow you, but an average defender with a good arm. So you could see him in right field out there. And before we move on to talk about other topic, I just want to put some more love on Peter Bendix. What he has done here, and this is not everything, but I'm gonna read through a few things. Let's go back to July. Actually, let's go back to May 2024. I mentioned the Luis Arias trade. Okay, they got Dylan Head, who's an outfielder, currently their 13th prospect. Jacob Marcy, who looked like an absolute stud last year when he was finally called up. Okay, those are two guys. There's two other guys in the deal, but let's stick to those two right now, especially Marcy. And then about 2 months later, July 5th, they traded A.J. Puck to the Diamondbacks for Davison De Los Santos, who is currently their 26th prospect. Guy that has tons of power, trying to figure some other stuff out. We'll see if anything becomes of him. And then a few weeks later, they traded Jazz Chisholm to the Yankees for Agustin Ramirez, who's now their starting catcher, probably cleanup hitter. A couple other guys in that trade as well. And a few days after that, July 30th, they pull off two more trades. Tanner Scott and Brian Hoeing go to the Padres for Adam Mazer, Jay Bashirs, Robbie Snelling, who we should at least mention a little bit here, is probably going to get a shot at the rotation now with Cabrera gone, and he absolutely lit it up at AAA last year. Okay, and currently their fourth prospect, but he's going to be a major leaguer soon. And Graham Pauley, who's on the major league roster as well. And then on that same day, they traded Trevor Rogers for Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers. Like, that's not everything, by the way. I stopped there. What a remaking of this team by Peter Bendix in a short amount of time. He has brought in some studs. I think Caissie is going to do very well there. And it is a fun lineup. I joked on Twitter, but I think I'm pretty serious. We are about a month away from seeing everybody pick the Marlins as their surprise team. And everyone's going to think they're going out on a limb. Everyone's going to be thinking they're unique and like, hey, guess who I would pick? No one else is going to pick these guys. Everyone's going to be saying Marlins are going to sneak into the playoffs this year. I don't know if I'll go that far. People were trying to say that about the Nationals last year too, and I kind of had the same thought. Like, yeah, they're fun. They're exciting. The names are cool, but not sure they're there yet. But I believe in the Marlins more this year than I did the Nationals last year. Because
the appropriate adjective is fun. They are a fun team. Look at them. I mean, they whooped on the Yankees late in the season. They swept them in Miami. And we also let's not forget, if you guys are watching some of the hockey that was been happening last week, we saw the Winter Classic between the Panthers and the Rangers. We got a little glimpse, maybe unintentional, of the Marlins bringing back that third teal jersey. So we saw the Marlins. There was the Nike logo on it. So it's not like it was just some guy rocking it. This was a promotional thing. So we could be seeing Owen Caissie. We could be seeing Kyle Stowers. These guys rocking the I mean, the amazing teal. They never should have got rid of it, if we're being honest. So bring it back. But to kind of put the bow on the Cubs, you mentioned them having the flexibility to pursue some impact offense. We still have figuring out Alex Bregman, where he's going to go. Bo Bichette for sure is highly sought after. He would certainly fit in a lineup for the Cubs, but because this Edward Cabrera move happened here, they're not spending all their money on pitching. Is a very affordable deal. If they want to spend it on offense, they certainly could. And it has to be the right deal, but the Cubs are certainly in the market to spend on offense if they want to compete with not only the Brewers, but they're looking big picture with the Dodgers. You know, if they want to be out here considered a contender in the National League, you got to improve this offense, and it starts with spending on one of those players.
And you mentioned one of those players is Bo Bichette, who now is suddenly in the news a lot. I mean, he's been in the news for months now, to be honest, but today I feel like his name was out there connected to the Yankees. We've seen his name connected to the Red Sox. Obviously, the Blue Jays still a possibility. The Dodgers, and the team that really got a lot of rumors today, because apparently they're going to meet in the coming days, is the Philadelphia Phillies, who had not previously been in the Bo Bichette market by all accounts. So let's give a little time here. I know most of this episode was dedicated to the trade, but let's talk a little bit about the possibility of Bo Bichette to the Phillies. First, I will say, Kyle Tucker, there's starting to be this rumor that his market might come to the place where he has to accept a shorter deal, high AAV. I don't think Bo Bichette is in that spot because these big these big teams are now involved suddenly. Like 5-6 of the big market teams are involved with Bo Bichette. So I think he's going to get a very solid number. But your thoughts on Bichette possibly landing in Philadelphia?
I mean, we saw him reestablish himself last year before the injury as one of the more dangerous contact hitters, fit so swimmingly in that lineup for the Blue Jays. 628 plate appearances, 311, 357, 483, the 18 home runs, and then coming back, even though he's limited physically in the World Series, came back, his bat was still there, 8 for 23, 27 plate appearances. He hit that 3-run bomb off for Shohei Ohtani in Game 7, a no-doubt blast that would have been a defining championship moment had Toronto's bullpen preserved the lead. But I think perhaps the most telling for the Phillies was how Bichette was deployed when he did return to the lineup, because he was able to play second base during the World Series, which is his first time at the position since the minors, which showed a willingness to move off of shortstop that materially improves his free agent fit for Philadelphia Phillies. And Philadelphia's internal plan, according to a lot of the reporting, you mentioned the meeting they're having on Monday, would probably be to install Bichette at third base. And this is up for conversation about where he would fit. I mean, obviously the arm strength would remain a question, but StatCast measured his average throw to first at 82.3 miles per hour, which places him in the 36th percentile, which is identical to Trey Turner and actually half a mile per hour stronger than Alec Boehm, who's already playing third in Philly right now. His arm, there's no doubt it's below average, but it's not a deal breaker if you want to have passable defense at the hot corner. And outside of that, Devin, I mean, the real obstacle is going to be financial, because you look at the Phillies payroll right now, they're projected for 2026 to be at $266 million, approximately $301 million in competitive balance tax obligations. So at that level, they're going to be taxed 95% on their first $3 million of Bichette's annual value, at 110% on every dollar beyond that. So that number is real. So in effect, if you're looking at all those numbers and crunching, putting in your calculator, Bichette would cost close to double his salary in the short term unless the contract was aggressively backloaded or do what the Dodgers do and defer a lot of the money. Right. But I think long-term, Howard, that is very more manageable. You can look at after the 26 season for the Phillies. If you really want to talk about their payroll, Nick Castellanos is coming off, Taijuan Walker, Jesus Luzardo, Jose Alvarado, Adolis Garcia, Edmundo Salsa, Alec Boehm, they're projected to all come off. So you look at their CBD figure dropping all the way down to $187 million. So if they want to make this work beyond 2027, you only have Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Kyle Schwarber, and Chris Sanchez remaining under guaranteed contracts. So, and Schwarber's the only player that's going to earn more than $27.5 million. Point being, if they want to make this happen, we'll talk about the downstream effects, they could make it happen. And I think you mentioned before, just picture him in that uniform. I can kind of see him calling Citizens Bank his home more than ever. And I know this is just a meeting. We have all these meetings. We talked about Black Monday. Well, the coaches of the NFL being fired, and they're all being in wine and dine. Where's John Harbaugh going? Is he going to be with your New York Giants? It's the same thing here. They're going to be meeting. They're having a conversation, due diligence, but it feels a little bit more than that now, especially since Bo Bichette. We haven't heard the news quite yet. To me, it's down to two teams. It's Bichette back to Toronto, or this Philly mystery team, just like they were the mystery team all the way back in the day with Cliff Lee. This could be very much similar to that.
Well, when I first saw the report, I was kind of with you. I'm like, oh, as a Met fan, mate, I was like, this is going to happen. He's going to be a Philly. When Dave Dombrowski wants something, he usually seems to be able to do what he needs to do to get it done. But then when I'm reading the athletic article about it, I mean, you named one of the hoops was the money is interesting. And you did say a few things that can relieve them a little bit. Castellanos, Taijuan Walker coming off the books eventually, some other guys down the road. And one other thing that is worth mentioning is, it's the last year of the CBA. There was something out there today, I believe Ken Rosenthal said another thing that could happen at next year's negotiations is the luxury tax threshold could be increased. So at that point, the tax penalties could reset. There could be some change, and maybe it's not as bad for them in that case. So they might be able to be smart enough to figure that out. But the pieces of the lineup and the field are even more complicated. Most likely it takes them out of JT Realmuto, where there's been a lot of people are surprised that he's not re-signed yet. It seems to be everyone's calling it a standoff from people who seem to have behind the scenes knowledge that something's not going right there. So they'd probably have to move on from him. You mentioned Alec Boehm. And it's been like 2 years now. There's been rumors that they've been motivated to move him, and I guess they just haven't liked the offers that have come in. But the problem with this is if you go sign Bo Bichette tomorrow, everyone knows you have to trade Alec Boehm. So you're not going to get shit back for him. You're going to have to swallow that pill that you are not getting shit for him. You have to find someone willing to take him on and his money, and that's it. You have to be satisfied with that. So if they can swallow that pill, okay. And if they're okay with JT leaving and maybe bringing in like a Victor Caratini here and kind of not worrying too much about having star power at catcher, I don't think that's the worst thing, to be honest, because, I mean, JT Realmuto's numbers have kind of fallen off a cliff anyway. He's not the guy he was when you brought him here. So I know the name is bigger, but maybe do some kind of platoon there and kind of patch something together. Bo Bichette would be great for the Philadelphia Phillies. As of now, they're kind of just bringing back the band a year older. Pitching with Zach Wheeler, a little more of a question, right? So you need something. I feel like this would inject it. When the offseason started, I thought a guy like Tucker was more a bigger possibility, but I get it. The Bryson Stott stuff is interesting, though, because, I mean, you mentioned most likely they put Bo Bichette at third. Bryson Stott debuted at third base. He can play third base. He's a hell of a fielder at second. So I think that's why they would be hesitant to make that move him off a place that he's been so damn good at, like top of the league. But I wouldn't be surprised if he can handle third pretty well as too. And then there was even a little bit of speculation that you could move Bryce Harper back to the outfield. I don't see that. I don't see moving a star that big back and forth. I think he's adjusted to first base really well, but I guess the thought is if you move him to the outfield, maybe Bryson Stott can play first, Bo Bichette can play second, or I don't know, and maybe Alec Boehm doesn't have to be traded, something like that. But it's a little messy in the field. The money is certainly not easy. So this sounds like something they are legitimately very interested in. But I wonder how they pivot with those problems that we just listed.
Yeah, and I think it's clear that they are at least willing to have the conversation, and so is Bo. I mean, it will be a bold move. There's no doubt about it. It will make a lot of the Phillies organization uncomfortable, whether it's the money or movement as far as playing different spots. You mentioned front office having to move Alec Boehm and figure out a catcher, because right now on the roster, looking at their depth chart, it's Rafael Marchand and Garrett Stubbs as their catcher going into opening day without JT Realmuto. So
yeah, not ideal.
You mentioned some of the other limited free agent pool out there. They could pursue a trade, of course. But there's some complications and ripple effects that will go here. But similar to what we're seeing with the Blue Jays, Bo Bichette's incoming team that he was already there and beautiful relationship he has there. It's about asking and answering those questions later and about winning right now. And the Phillies right now look at the window being open of saying, hey, listen, man, they have $117 million in guaranteed money committed for 2028. This is a team right now. They want to go all in. There's some relief coming on the back end. It's not like this team is going to be hit very hard out here. If they kind of suck it up, if you win a World Series, it'll be all worth it.
And that's for sure. And I like I said, like I kind of get it. Like I right now they're just running it back when you really thought, like, what have the Phillies done this offseason? They brought back Kyle Schwarber, which was big, but like, what can you really point to say the result is going to be different next year. And Bo is the perfect kind. I mean, I'll be honest. I feel like Bo Bichette would fit any team wonderfully right now, like any team in the bigs, because the type of hitter he is just, let's be honest, no one hits 300 anymore. Like there's very few of those. Those guys are going extinct. So to get a guy like that and throw him in that lineup that is kind of predicated on Kyle Schwarber's power and hoping that Bryce Harper gets back to that elite status, right? It's a very, very nice piece. You could put him almost anywhere in the lineup, however he fits. So I think they have some competition, though. The Dodgers are lurking as always, and he would fit really, 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 really well there, too. Let's be honest. Okay, he actually makes more sense for the Dodgers when you talk about positions. The Yankees were also – the Phillies were most of the talk today about Bo because they have that meeting scheduled. But I also saw a lot about the Yankees because the Cody Bellinger stuff is just kind of – they've made 2 offers that I think they feel good about and nothing's happening. Apparently, they're willing to pivot to a guy like Bo Bichette, which I know I saw Blue Jays fans' reactions on Twitter today of everyone just being a little nauseous with the thought of him in pinstripes. And yeah, that one would hurt Blue Jays fans.
Yeah, and we mentioned just the season he had, and we'll close this up here with this conversation. But if you really zoom in on the numbers, looking at some of the window here from July 6th through the end of the regular season, we saw a 381, 437, 591 slash line across 238 plate appearances. He had 24 doubles. He homered 7 times, walking at an 8.8% clip, and struck out just 11.3% of the time. So if you expand that window even further back to mid-June, he closed the season with 330 plate appearances, a slash line of 350, 395, 538. So if you didn't have that injury, you can imagine what the season would have looked like. This is a guy in contention for a potential MVP. We know it came down to 2 guys in the American League, but Bichette was putting up numbers like, and he was able to do it on one leg in the World Series as well. And this is a guy who is a gritty, team first, hardworking, clubhouse type of guy that we're not even talking about. We're talking about production on the field. This is a guy who feels like all his teammates love playing with him. This guy's willing to risk further injury by being on the field, even as a free agent. This is a guy who wants to win, and you can't discount that when you're talking about free agency and wanting to bring a guy into a market like Philadelphia.
And the timing does make sense with Don Mattingly just taking that job there. So I think those guys are close. Makes sense. As a Met fan, I'm kind of keeping my fingers crossed that it doesn't happen at this point. I'm just being honest. I'm not trying to be biased. But, again, I just feel like Dave Dombrowski kind of has that record of like when he wants someone, he gets it done. And if he's in that mode right now, if he's changed his mind about Bo Bichette and he's 100% in, I think he's going to find a way around those barriers that we talked about.
So this is episode 129 here. We've been posting a lot of content through this offseason. We appreciate all the support and all the new reviews and conversations, new followers on Twitter and also on Instagram. You guys can check us out at Tablesetters Pod on IG or on X. But later this week or a couple days from now, we'll be dropping another fun episode down the line. So stay tuned for that. We're going to continue to give you guys a lot of Major League Baseball content. Just also, we're reading the tea leaves about what's happening in the future. We just got the Athletic article that just dropped that Rob Manfred himself is considering a play-in tournament similar to the NBA Cup, where yours truly posted a reel right after the Knicks beat the Spurs to win the NBA Cup, talking about MLB potentially doing. I'm not the only one saying and speculating that Major League Baseball could do it, but it seems very similar. And the conversations Manfred's having would be rubbing a lot of traditionalists the wrong way, to put it lightly, talking about the division realignment, an in-season break, splitting the season up. It would be certainly something way different than traditional baseball fans are looking at, but giving Manfred a lot of credit, and then people do give him credit, but I think he deserves more of a look into looking at this baseball game as more than just what it used to be, but what it will become. And that's kind of taking a playbook out of Adam Silver in the NBA, not just for the play-in tournament, but just expanding a progressive thought of not just always thinking about what was, but what could be, and expanding the popularity. So I'm not writing off anything that he said, because all of this is an open play.
Yeah, never wrong, just early, right? You had that one, man. I got to give you credit there. And he also said, I had another interesting quote, and we won't get into it right now, but just something to go read about if you're interested, where they talked about realignment, which he's been open about wanting to do before he retires in a few years down the road, or at least get started before he leaves. He said, interestingly enough, if they did realignment, he would not put teams that share the same market in the same division. So he would not put the Yankees and Mets in the same division like people thought. He would not put the Cubs and the White Sox in the same division like people had previously thought. So that's one thing to make note of and then keep in mind. I thought that was an interesting quote that I was a little surprised by.
So again, we'll be back soon with episode 130, a really fun random lineup generator. So stay tuned for that. There's gonna be a lot of good conversation that Devin and I have of having to put our GM hat on to build a team. And you guys stay tuned for that. More offseason content. Of course, we got more guests coming up. I mentioned Instagram and Twitter at Tablesetters Pod, driving conversation, posting reels, keeping baseball alive to try to build the bridge from now until the first day of spring training and the World Baseball Classic, as Devin mentioned, and eventually the glorious day on Netflix, opening day. Can't wait for it. It's going to be a really good time behind paywalls, if it will, but we'll be guiding you guys all through the game of baseball. But Devin, any last words before we get out of here?
No, Bichette, just take a second thought if you're listening to the episode about the whole Philly thing. Toronto's probably a nicer city, right? I mean, I don't really want you in LA. I mean, you come to New York and be on the Yankees. It doesn't really bother me as a Met fan, but I think just have a second thought about the Philly thing.
You think if he goes to Phillies and talk to Marsh and Jason Worth about putting some grease in that hair and making him look real Philadelphia-fied?
He'd have to grow it back out. It's short nowadays.
I know, but you still get grease in there. It still hangs a little bit out of the hat. I'm not saying it's long. He still has a little bit of the show hair in the back of the helmet.
Yeah,
no?
I guess. Just grow it back out, and yeah.
It's a long off season too. We haven't seen him in a
greasy.
couple months. He grows fast. He's
That's
got
true.
a lot of hair. All right, we'll be back in a little bit talking all things baseball. Until that time, we'll talk to you after a while. And as always, happy baseball.